Yes, time for another preview here on Fulhamish, and well, probably Fulham's biggest game of the season. We travel up to Turf Moor, trying to get our first win at Burnley since 1951. Yes, you heard me correctly, 1951. Burnley versus Fulham. It's a relegation six-pointer. Luckily though, to get a bit of a Burnley perspective on things, I've got Nat Bromley from No Nay Never. Nat, how's it going?
It's going well, thank you.
So I was thinking earlier today, the last time you and I spoke, Fulham, we were 3 games into the season and we were still so buoyant about all the signings we made. Obviously, it was a brilliant game for Fulham, the one down at Craven Cottage. You guys were still in Europe at that point. Who knew that just 6 months later, it would come to this, a relegation six-pointer. Europe is a distant dream for you guys, and we are 19th in the table and have had a rotten season. How big a game in your season is this for Burnley?
Oh, it's massive, and I just feel sick at the prospect of it. To be fair, it's been a couple of seasons since we had a game of this magnitude, really. Just because we've had a couple of seasons where everything exceeded expectations. So it's an unusual position that Sean Dyche finds himself in, where he's battling something and he's under pressure, and his as Sean Dyche's side is having to dig deep and get themselves out of a bit of a hole that they've created for themselves. I know you and I were just talking about this just before we started recording, in that I think on balance the worst scenario is you guys losing than us. I think if we lose, it's not a disaster, but it does put us back in a tough position, whereas obviously if you guys lose, it's just, you know, it's compounding like you say, a difficult season for you anyway.
I mean, I was having a look at your fixtures and they've been kind in the last couple. You've picked up a couple of really important wins in the league. Your fixtures are also fairly kind throughout the whole of January, bar a trip to a rejuvenated Man United. However, I was looking at your running. Wow. Those final
God.
4 games, if you're in any trouble going into those, you must be worried about those. I think it's Arsenal and Everton and maybe even City in there.
We've got, I think in the last 4 games, we play Arsenal, City, Spurs and Liverpool are our last 4 games, which is just beyond ridiculous. You guys will get used to this, but hopefully you do stay up this season. When you're in the Premier League and you're not in the top 6, you know, people look at the fixtures when the Premier League fixtures come out and they look at, oh, who have we got at home? Where's Boxing Day? I go straight to the last 8 games of the season, just because that can really dictate how our team season goes. And I saw ours this season and just was, it's horrible. Essentially for us, our season finishes 4 games earlier than everybody else's. So we need to be comfortable by the end of March, mid-April at the very, very latest. Because if we're needing to go into those last 4 games, especially if things like Champions League and top 4 and top 6 haven't yet been fully decided, we're in a whole world of pain. Indeed.
And what has been the reason for the unravelling of this Burnley team? Finished 7th last season, got into Europe, just seems so solid at the back. I mean, you haven't quite conceded as many goals as Fulham, but you're not far behind. I think the 5-1 defeat to Everton really seemed to be the nadir of your season, and so many people from outside of Burnley just trying to work out what on earth's happened? Why is this Sean Dyche team no longer looking organised like it just has done for years and years?
Yeah, I think there's 2 key points to this. In terms of general tactics of the team, if you look at last season, we actually started to get figured out around February last year, and we really didn't have a particularly strong end to the season. I think we had a short spell where we won some back-to-back games, but all of our points and essentially Europe was won last season up to Christmas. We got into 4th position around the Christmas time, and then we just sort of consolidated that top 7 position for the rest of the season. But actually things started to unravel for Sean Dyche and his Premier League tactics around February time last season. So I think the main thing that we look at here is Dyche set a team up last season to be tricky to play against, to defend very well, to be hard to beat and try and nick goals is exactly what we did. By sort of 3/4 of the way through the season, other Premier League managers had cottoned onto this and knew how to counteract it. And Dyche hasn't quite found a plan B yet. So we ended the season in that sort of tricky spell of, I don't really know what to do next. And he actually started this season deploying exactly the same tactics. Teams have wised up to it very quickly, and it's a very easy strategy to beat. So he hasn't yet found a different way of winning and a different way of performing when you are Burnley in this league. Now, the main reason that this has all gone terrible, as you've mentioned, is our defensive record's just gone completely off the boil, which is really weird considering that the majority of our defence is the same defence as they were there last season. Apart from two key issues for me, we've had keeper problems. We've had a ridiculous scenario where 12 months, albeit nearly an anniversary of each other, we lost Tom Heaton all of last season for a dislocated shoulder. And then in the first European game away at Aberdeen, Nick Pope had exactly the same injury and he's been out, so he's not played either. And we had to bring Joe Hart in as an emergency England keeper because clearly we only sign England goalkeepers and we like to have the whole roster on our books at Burnley. And it's just not worked for him. And I don't think technically Hart's really done an awful lot wrong, but clearly there are some personnel issues and there's some dressing room issues because the back four in front of him just didn't want to play for him, and you didn't see that togetherness as a defensive unit that we saw last year. Tom Heaton's now come back into the side, Nick Pope's fit. We fully expect Joe Hart to be dropped down to third choice keeper, and suddenly we're getting clean sheets and only conceding one goal, and the defence starts to look like it did last season. So I suspect the changing keeper will change that, but if we were brutally honest here, Dyche needs to start adopting some different tactics and maybe even trying a few shots on target. That would be a revelation.
You and me both after watching Fulham's Oldham game at the weekend. Also, Ben Gibson coming into the side. He's had injury problems. You bought him for quite a lot of money from Middlesbrough. Has he had a little bit of an impact as well?
Yeah, a little bit. He's not really had an awful lot of chance to shine yet, and he found himself because of that hernia operation down at fourth choice centre half, which is a little bit harsh. I'm a huge fan of Ben Gibson. I really like him, and I actually believe at some point he will displace Ben Mee. I believe if we can keep him, Gibson and Tarkowski might end up being our centre half pair, albeit we've then got a couple of left footers, so we'll have to see how that works. It's a bit tough for Gibson because he came into the side this season in Sean Dyche's experiment with three centre halves and five at the back, in which we I think conceded five, then 4, then 3. I think so. Clearly that didn't work, and then he's been dropped again. So it's a real tough one because the games that he's played where it's been 4 at the back, I've been really, really impressed. I just don't know how he's going to fight his way and displace either Ben Mee or James Tarkowski. It's not going to happen.
So you talk about this recipe that all the other Premier League clubs seem to have discovered as the kind of antidote to playing Burnley, and it's been around a year really since Premier League clubs cottoned on to the Burnley way and how to counter it. What is the way that clubs tackle Burnley and really kind of cut through as they have so many times this season? What's the classic setup which you as a Burnley fan see and go, oh great, they figured us out?
I think most importantly, attack with everything that you've got. If you let a Sean Dyche Burnley side get their noses in front and go 1-0 ahead, we are incredibly difficult to beat. We are stubborn, we are resilient, and normally we'll defend for our lives and you'll struggle to get back in the game. What we're not so great at is coming back from games. Now, I was really encouraged to see the Huddersfield away game last week where we went 1-0 behind in another massive game for us away at the John Smith Stadium. But we did manage to come back into that game, which is really, really good to see. But generally speaking, if sides get early goals against us this season, we're just crumbling and we're done. And because we play to those advantages and we play to the percentages, we really defend well and try and nick an opportunity to get one goal ahead. If we're a couple of goals down, like Boxing Day, for example, 15 minutes gone and we were 3-0 down at home to Everton, there's absolutely no way we're getting back. We very rarely score more than 2 goals a game, and most of the times we win by 1 goal. So if you can get into that defence and score early, we're done.
Well, that's interesting because in recent games, and I think the Huddersfield game was probably the biggest thing for us, when we set up with 5 at the back against Huddersfield and we completely played into their hands by not really attacking them with the full gusto that we can, and we managed to nick a result in the 90th minute, but we've got so frustrated by that. So hopefully if Claudio is watching, he might rethink his strategy and maybe put a bit more attacking firepower against Burnley's backline on Saturday. Going forward, who are the main threats? I've always been a big fan of Ashley Barnes, and I know he's very popular with the Burnley faithful as well.
Yeah, Ashley Barnes is just an absolute Burnley legend, and it's really nice to see Ashley Barnes' journey. He first came to us back in the 2014 season when we were chasing Leicester for promotion automatic, and we ended up coming up behind them as runners-up. And he was brought in because at the time Danny Ings and Sam Vokes both got injured. And bless his heart, he didn't even look at the time like he was strong enough to play in the Championship. And 4.5 years later, he's probably our most ruthless striker in the Premier League at this club at the moment. He ended last season very, very strong, and was a little bit unfortunate at the start of the season to not really start in the same, I guess, what's the word I'm looking for? The same vigour that he did at the end of the last season. Chris Wood is a striker I'm a huge fan of, but again has had a really disappointing first half. Unluckily for you guys, the Ashley Barnes-Chris Wood partnership has just started to come good, and they are playing with real threat, and they're playing very well together. So I'd say those two together with Dwight McNeil, our new young wing wizard, putting some balls into the box, they're the ones that you should expect to see some goals from.
Well, I imagine they're licking their lips at the thought of getting into this Fulham defence. So the record at Turf Moor. I did an interview with the guys from Toffee TV about Fulham's record at Goodison Park, which is kind of equally as bad, but not quite as bad as our record at Turf Moor. Is this something Burnley fans are aware of? I know we haven't played each other tons, and it's not like we go to Turf Moor every single season for the last 60 years, but it is notably bad. Is this something that really Burnley fans are aware of? They're like, oh, here comes Fulham, here's 3 points.
Well, they weren't, but I think they are now, and I certainly wasn't that aware of this. Now, there is obviously a caveat to this in that your guys' record's that bad, you're clearly due a win. That's something that always really worries me. We have a feature on our podcast that we have a look at a head-to-head. We have a resident statistician who does the head-to-head stats for us for the teams. And when we don't do ours for video, ours is just a podcast. And we have, he always does me Natalie's cheat sheet so that I can see behind the scenes what he's talking about and do some prompts. And he adopts a traffic light system, obviously, losses, wins and draws. And normally, like I think the last one we did was Spurs, and everything was just red. And I opened my cheat sheet this week and everything was green. I was just like, this is amazing.
Jeez.
So certainly the known and never listeners will certainly are now aware of Fulham's record at Turf Moor, and long may that continue. Sorry.
Well, I'm hoping for some change, but it's definitely one that's a bit legendary amongst Fulham fans, the record at Turf Moor. One game that sticks in my mind up at Turf Moor was an FA Cup game about 10 years ago, maybe a tiny bit more. And I think it was a replay under Chris Coleman, and we fell apart. And you were the Championship side, and we were the Premier League team, and there was an interview on the Fulham website this week about how it was the most animated that Sean Davis had ever seen John Tigana get. He said he's a man that never gets angry, but half-time at Turf Moor during that FA Cup game absolutely lost the plot. My first trip up to Burnley on Saturday, what would you recommend? There's a decent amount of away fans coming. The trains are a nightmare, there just are no trains to Burnley. But once we eventually get into the city, how would you recommend spending the day up until the match?
Well, I'm very honoured that you call Burnley a city. It's not a city, so I don't want to mislead your listeners in any way. It's a very small mill town in the hills of Lancashire, East Lancashire. Look, Burnley's a typical Lancashire town. It's an old mill town, and it's one of the founding members of the Football League. And I think what sometimes comes with that is a reputation of the 80s and 90s, hard places to go and trouble, and don't walk around, don't poke your car, they don't wear colours. And actually, Turf Moor in 2019 now, couldn't be further from the truth. We're in good spirits, we're loving our football, it's a family friendly club, and it's a great community, and it's one of those towns where the football club is right in the centre of the town, and the town's empty at 3 o'clock on a Saturday or 4 o'clock on a Sunday or whenever we're playing anymore in the Premier League. But the town empties because everybody's at Turf Moor. So, wear your colours, drink with the locals. The bouncers and the police will tell you with any club, which are the pubs to avoid. Head down to the cricket club, actually, which is the cricket field stand where you guys are sitting. The cricket club's right behind it.
Okay.
And that place is a great place. There might be some cricket on. There might be, away fans and home fans in there. And the atmosphere is really friendly there and everybody mingles. Treat yourselves to a Holland's meat and potato pie because they are the best. And what Burnley's famous for, a Benny and Hot. And I'm not going to tell you any more of that, but I want some of your listeners to maybe tweet us and let us know if A, they had a Benny and Hot, and B, what they thought of it.
A Benny and Hot?
Benny and Hot.
Okay.
Yeah, Benedictine and hot water.
I'm going to get a Benny and Hot, and I'm going to tweet a photo to @NoNayNever, and you can all enjoy that later on Saturday when you see a ridiculously southern person trying to have the most northern sounding dish I've ever heard in my life.
Oh, it's not a dish. Oh, this is getting better. I can't wait.
Is it a drink?
It's a drink, yes.
Okay.
It's a liqueur called Benedictine, which is only basically served in Burnley. I think we're Europe's leading stockist of Benedictine. It's just a liqueur and you drink it with hot water, and we're expecting some snow and some real storms over the weekend at Turf Moor, so it's going to be pretty cold. So bring your thermals, have a Benny and Hot, and all will be well with the world.
Have a drink of Benny and Hot. I absolutely can't wait. Nat, thank you for giving the lowdown ahead of the game on Saturday, and a bit of good luck for the rest of the season, but not too much.
Yeah, let us both survive. That would be the best thing.
Come on, Fulham.